Heights family. This is your Wednesday Minister Moment. On Monday, Adam reminded everybody that the church staff was in quarantine, and so we find all of ourselves waiting at home. The problem is that in our culture, people don't like to wait. I mean, that's why we have fast food, fast cars, and next day delivery. We don't want to wait for things. We want it now. But that's where we're at. And when you think about 2020, this year has been one major interruption after another. We're waiting for a vaccine. We've waited for businesses to open. We wait in quarantine. We wait for our test results. We wait to have a holiday where all of our family can gather together and not be afraid to do that. We wait for a time when all of us can come back and worship together in the same place and not be afraid to do that. And until then, we wait for the live stream to stop buffering. And through all of that, we get frustrated. Because when we wait, we become very impatient. I don't know if you have that problem, but I know that I do. In the book, Everybody Always, Bob Goff talks about his issue and problem with impatience. He says that he read a book about buckets. And in that book about buckets, what he learned, the main premise of the book was that whatever we fill our buckets with, that's what we become. Whatever we fill other people's buckets with, that has an impact on them. And so he decided that he wanted to fill his bucket with patience. And to remind him of that, he went out and bought a bucket. So he went to a hardware store, bought a little metal bucket, and he carried it around with him everywhere he went. When he got into his car, when he was in a taxi cab, when he was on a bus, when he was in an airplane, when he was at a business meeting, he had his bucket. And people looked at him kind of weird, but this was reminding him that he needed to be patient with other people. Now, he got a call one day from a friend of his in Austin, Texas, who wanted him to come and preach at the church that he was a minister at. It was a large church with multiple services, so he was supposed to speak 2 or 3 times that day. But it turned out that that day was Super Bowl Sunday. Now, for Bob, that presented a little bit of a problem because Bob lives on the West Coast. And so he was going to have to fly to Austin, and one of his traditions, he and his wife have as a tradition, is that they watch the Super Bowl together every year and eat nachos. It's an important day for them. Well, he made sure that he would schedule his flight so that he would be able to be back in time to be there with his wife. And so he goes to Austin, he preaches, he takes care of everything he needs to do there, and then at the end of that, he hops in his car and he heads back to the airport to catch his flight. Now he has to turn his rental car in first. So he gets in line and he chooses poorly. He chooses the wrong line because the line just to the side of him is going by pretty quickly. People keep moving up, but his line is kind of stagnant. After 5 minutes, he looks out the window and he sees that the young man who is helping people up at the front is just kind of moving very slowly. It seems like he's not really in any hurry, isn't very efficient, and this frustrates Bob. 10 minutes goes by, and he hasn't moved very far. 15 minutes goes by. 20 minutes goes by. He's still not at the front of the line, and at this point, he knows he's going to miss his flight. And so all of these thoughts go through his mind. All this anger is welling up inside of him. He wants to let this kid have it. He wants to let him know that he doesn't appreciate the kind of work that he's doing and that he's made him miss his plane. And he's thinking about how he's going to say it and what he's going to say. And then he pulls up. He's right to the beginning of the line just before the young man opens the door, and then Bob sees his bucket. And it reminds him, I need to be patient. And so as the young man opens the door, he says, how was your rental car experience? And Bob says, it was great. The rental car was awesome. Airplanes are awesome. You're awesome. And I hope you have a great day. He gathers his stuff together and begins to walk off. When the young man reaches out and he grabs his shoulder and he says, I just want to tell you that I really appreciated the sermon that you shared with us this morning. It was at that moment that Bob realizes that if he would have let that young man have it, it would have destroyed the message that he had preached that day. That he would have said one thing on Sunday morning and acted a completely different way that afternoon. Isn't that how we are sometimes? We put on a good face at church. We maybe even be patient there. But when we go through the week, we get rid of that. In Colossians chapter 3, Paul writes that we should clothe ourselves with patience. He also says in Galatians chapter 5 that patience is a fruit of the Spirit. So if we want to be consistent, then we need to wear patience. And we need to allow God's Spirit to work in us in such a way that we will show patience to others, even when we feel impatient, we feel frustrated. It's important because we can't claim one thing and act another. We can't claim to follow Jesus and act like we don't know him. And that was one of the things that Bob was reminded of that day. He makes a statement in his book. He says, we all encounter difficulties. It's what we do next that defines us. What I hope is that the Spirit of God defines us, that he works in our lives in such a way that even in all these times where we're waiting and where there are interruptions, that we are patient with others, that we show God's love to others, and that we fill their buckets with that love. I hope that in your frustrations, that you'll think about your bucket and that you'll fill it with patience. I hope that this has been a blessing to you and that you can be a blessing to others. Have a great week.